Hello and welcome to the third episode of Radar, the podcast which takes you inside Safran's universe and focuses on all the group's strategic subjects. In this third podcast, we are going to learn how Safran is getting ready for the 2022 ramp-up. After nearly 2 years of COVID-19 health crisis, the group's companies are ready to respond to the numerous orders coming. How is this ramp-up organized, whether it is regarding recruitment, relations with supplier, supply chain, what are the objectives and the challenges to be met in the coming months? At Safran, teams worldwide are in the starting blocks. To introduce us this global strategy, we are going to meet with 2 Safran employees who are either preparing for the production ramp-up. Pierre Champtiaux, Civil Engines Production Director at Safran Aircraft Engines, and Jake Hughes, the Supply Chain Manager for Safran Landing Systems. So how do companies get ready for the ramp-up? Let's begin with the civil engine ramp-up with Pierre Champtiaux. Good afternoon, Pierre.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for welcoming us here in Villaroche, France, at Safran Aircraft Engines, where the ever so famous LEAP engine is produced. Every week, around 20 engines are ready to take off, and the goal is to increase production more and more. And with you, Pierre, we are going to see how this civil engine ramp-up is possible after nearly 2 years. A first question for you, Pierre. Can you give us some key figures about this ramp-up?
First, the LEAP engine, we have 3 different versions. LEAP 1A for Airbus, LEAP 1B for Boeing, and LEAP 1C for Comac. So all these 3 versions will have to be ramping up. To give you some figures, we had obviously 2 difficult years in 2020 and 2021. With 800 LEAP engines produced. And now we need to ramp up back to 2,000 LEAP engine in 2023. So it's a very big figure, very important one. And it is in relation with the sales backlog that we have, which is 10,300 engine as of end of 2021.
What production departments are involved in this ramp-up and how do we get ready?
Well, in terms of assembly, first we should speak about our partner, which is General Electric. As you know, the LEAP engine is manufactured 50-50 by General Electric and by Safran. And so obviously GE will be a key player in the success of this ramp-up. Regarding really the assembly lines, first, all the team in Villaroche are involved. So from the assembly lines with the fitters, also to the test cells, where we test all the engines. Also all the support services, which make sure everything is going smoothly. And also, let's not forget our teams worldwide with fitters also and assembly lines in Querétaro, in Mexico, or in Suzhou in China. And we also have teams a little bit all around the world to support the aircraft manufacturers. So we have teams in Boeing, in Seattle, in Airbus, in Toulouse, in Hamburg, but also in the US or in China. And teams also in Comac, in Shanghai. Regarding ramp-up preparation, what we are doing is we are redoing a ramp-up. The first one was between 2016 and 2020. And so what we are doing is we are reusing the same tools that have made the success of the first one. So mainly a lot of tools regarding workload and versus capacity analysis, also some risk analysis. And we develop what we call a baseline in each of the involved departments to make sure that they will be ready for this new ramp-up. Just to give you an example, for our test cells, where we are now using sustainable fuels, we have made sure, as part of this analysis, that our fuel suppliers will be ready to be with us in this ramp-up.
What are the key drivers to make a successful ramp-up?
Well, the first one is manpower, obviously, and skills. The very good news here is that Safran has made a lot of efforts in order to keep the key skills that we need to achieve this ramp-up. Second, very important point is that we have restarted soon enough, middle of last year, to hire and train people everywhere in the world, both in France, but also in China or in Mexico. And so we have enough time to properly train them, which is obviously a key for the success of the ramp-up. A second point is also the supply chain. As an assembly line, we cannot assemble the parts we don't have. So it's critical that the suppliers manage to have the same level of ramp-up than we do. They are using the same tools, the same baselines to make their analysis, to make sure they will be ready. And once again, Safran has made sure and has made the effort that to preserve the critical industrial capacity to have a smooth ramp-up again in 2022 and 2023. Finally, I would like to speak about quality, because the quality requirements of our customers have not lowered due to the crisis, quite the opposite actually. So we are addressing the quality improvement with different ways. The first one is to use some company project like the APQP or Quality for Trust. We are also focusing on innovation, which has always been a strong focus for the assembly lines. And even during the difficult years of 2020 and 2021, we never stopped working on that. And so, for example, we have been developing our visual inspection robot, which is called Homer, or also working on augmented reality, which provides a very valuable help for our fitters doing their job. Let's not forget about field innovation, which is a key driver to improve our quality processes on a day-to-day basis. So with all of that, we are looking forward to this ramp-up with both confidence and humility. Confidence because we know that we have the skills, we know that our team are ready, that they have already been doing such kind of ramp-up. And with humility because we know that things will not go perfectly as expected, and so we'll have to face some unexpected difficulty and challenges.
Thank you, Pierre Champtiaux. Now it's time to fly across the ocean to meet our second guest, Jake Hughes, to talk about Safran Landing Systems ramp-up. Hi, Jake.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Jake Hughes, you are Supply Chain Director at Safran Landing Systems, and we met you in Kentucky. As in Europe, you had to live with the sanitary crisis, which has impacted the demand, but also the production chain. When the crisis started in February 2020, production suddenly dropped, less 70% in just 4 months. And today, more than a return to normal, you have to be ready to produce even more.
Yes, so welcome to our site in Walton, Kentucky, where we have 2 business segments. We have carbon, where we produce the carbon heat sinks, and then we have wheels and brakes, where we produce wheels and brakes assemblies.
Firstly, Jake, how is the market today at the beginning of 2022? And what are you expecting for this year?
22 projects to be a year of promising growth for carbon and a first sign of recovery for the wheels and brakes segment. So starting with carbon, we focus on units of metric tons, or what we call tonnage produced. And so our business is driven through a few different segments. One, we have what is driven through the final assembly line. And then we also have a segment which is driven by the in-service aircraft. So in February of 2020, we were producing at a level of around 50 metric tons per month here in Walton. And by June of 2020, we were down to 15 metric tons. So we lost 70% right off the bat. We seem to have hit a true rock bottom in the summer of 2020, around August, when we produced only 2 metric tons for the month. In 2021, we did start to see some kind of a ramp up. So between the first and second semesters, we produced only 13 metric tons in January of 2021, and we were up to 26 by July. And then ultimately had a few months at the end, near quarter 4 of 21, where we produced between 35 and 40 metric tons. And so in 2022, we are planning to produce at a level of around 40 metric tons per month, which will indicate about an 80% recovery if that forecast holds true. As mentioned for carbon, we benefit from in-service flights, which have started to recover. A few metrics that we're tracking. So looking back at January of 2020, we saw around 30,000 flights per day equipped with our wheels and brakes. In January of 2022, we see 22,500 flights per day. In 2021, we saw another peak in European traffic to 100% of the pre-pandemic levels in the late summer. The North American market also continues to show some encouraging trends where the market really recovered by May of 2021, and we've seen some encouraging forecasts that have been shared from some major airlines such as United, which indicate that they forecast more flights in 2022 than in 2019. The Latin American market, which is big for us as well, has shown some encouraging trends since quarter 4 of 2021. And there was also the US military, which provided some degree of a bottom or a floor to the tough months of the crisis. On the wheels and brakes side, in 2019, they assembled nearly 14,000 wheel and brake assemblies. In 2020 and 2021, they were heavily impacted by the decrease in the final assembly line volume. In 2022, they are forecasting a return to something which is more like the 2015 levels at around 9,000 assemblies for the year, and they maintain a more encouraging forecast for 2023 to 2025.
Can you tell us more about your organization for the ramp-up? And did you have to change many things?
The short answer is definitely yes, we had to change and we had to adapt. In Carbon, we unveiled a new streamlined organization in the first and second quarter of 2021 for our high-temp furnace segment of the business. That's a segment that is the most cost-intensive portion of our business, and we had the goal of streamlining both the management aspect, but also expanding the capabilities of the operators, which we retained throughout the crisis. We've also had to take on a more careful and increased monitoring of our safety stocks of production consumables, for example. Externally, we also had to keep in mind that several of our suppliers were impacted as much as or more than we were from the pandemic. So that encompasses manpower, raw materials, issues with logistics, and we've had to adapt how we work with them and the terms for which we provide forecasts, etc. The situation is continuously evolving, and not only does that result in change for us, but also for our suppliers. That's something we've had to keep in mind. Strategically, we've also had to temporarily change our human resources structure locally in order to increase the number of candidates applying to our business and ultimately improve our rate of success with hiring.
Is the hiring impacted by the crisis? Is it harder to find new employees?
Again, the answer is definitely yes. So strictly for Carbon, we saw a decrease in the labor force by 20% in 2020, which was driven by the onset of the pandemic. And then we saw a second 15% reduction in 2021, which began to be significant as we also started to see a recovery in the second half of 2021. Ultimately, today, that puts us at a place of about 70% of our pre-pandemic headcount. In 2022, for Carbon alone, we're at a headcount of around 100 employees, and we're budgeted to return back to 150 by the end of the year. Currently, for the site, we're carrying around 40 open positions. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Kentucky, we have seen a drop in the labor force as a whole of nearly 4%, which represents around 100,000 people that have stopped working due to the pandemic. As a result, our unemployment rate is lower than pre-pandemic levels at less than 5% and preliminarily estimated to be as low as 3.9% in December of 2021. So as I mentioned previously, our HR department has temporarily adapted their structure to aid in increasing the rate of success of hiring, and we must continue to advertise and highlight that Safran Landing Systems is a good place to work through promoting our teams and open positions on social networks, for example. One bonus point that we've also seen, which can be interesting, is that we're starting to see some people which left during the crisis in 2020 for various reasons, asked to inquire or even in some cases return to our site in late 2021 and 2022, which is encouraging.
Thank you to Jake Hughes and thanks to Pierre Champtiaux for being our two radars on the day on the subject of the ramp-up. See you soon.